Hi everyone, thanks to the conference organizers for having me. I'm Paolo Gerbaudo and I'm very glad to be here to present some preliminary findings of a research I'm currently conducting with some colleagues in Italy about Salvini's Facebook page, Salvini, the leader of right-wing populist party Lega Nord, and question of emotions and engagement. We take these as an example of right-wing populism and as a means to explore more broadly emotional mechanisms on social media and politics. This is a collective research. Besides me, Federica Annunziata, Silvia Keeling, Antonia Murolo, Ciro De Falco, and Giulia Giorgi are contributing to this research. And in this presentation, I shall outline the main aspects of the research and the preliminary findings we have, hoping to get some comments from you to make the paper even better. So the outline, we look at research questions, at the literature review, at a number of statistics we have explored, such as the evolution of engagement, the correlation with angry reactions and user engagement, which is in a way the core of the paper, topic and sentiment analysis, which we use in order to have a more rounded understanding of the subject matter, semantic network analysis, and finally the conclusion, where we will try to summarize a bit the different issues and different aspects we have found in our research. So let me start now with the abstract. Our project explores the relationship between emotions, social media, content, and user engagement on Matteo Salvini's Facebook page. We chose this page because Salvini is one of the politicians with the largest followings on political Facebook in Europe, with a page of around 4 million followers. And we try to address how the emotional nature of social media content has effects on social media publics and assess the question of the virality of negative content. This is a question that, as you will know, has been very, very hotly debated in academic circles and activist circles alike in recent years, as many people assume that, in a way, social media favor populism because of the way in which it channels negative contents and the way in which this content tends to have a very strong visibility, a very strong audience, and therefore to create consensus, consent for these extreme political positions. And assessing this variety of negative content, we actually found a statistically significant correlation between negative emotions, angry and sad, and shares. So which seems to prove the point that we wanted to make. Sentiment analysis on the text of posts, however, produced more contradictory results, requiring more in-depth analysis of that aspect. It showed that Salvini uses mostly positive language in many of the posts, though it also showed that immigration and crime posts tend to have a slightly more negative language. So we shall begin with some background and literature review, because it's always important to understand the kind of general debate and how people are approaching this issue in order to position then our own contribution in the field. We know that social media, there's a number of papers that have looked at these issues. Some very notable ones include Enli and Skogerbo piece from 2013, Social Media as a Tool for Political Communication for Individual Politicians. The very highly cited high arousal emotions are known to be more viral by Berger and Milkman, which made a very interesting point, namely that it's not either positive or negative emotions that are a predictor of high engagement, but rather emotions that have high intensity, regardless of whether they're positive or negative. Then the famous or a highly controversial paper by Kramer et al., members of Facebook owned like data science team that was widely criticized because of its methodology and concerns about privacy, that found that positive contents are more likely to be shared and be more viral or contagious on Facebook, which in a way would be kind of against our argument or against our hypothesis about the virality of negative content. So really engaging with these papers, what we are trying to understand is whether it is true that positive and negative emotions tend to have correlation with user engagement and shares. And fundamentally, what is the motivation for this correlation, if it exists at all? The research question, to put them in a structured form, are fundamentally three. Is there a positive correlation between hateful comments and high engagement on the page? What is the reaction of users to angry and hateful comments? So basically, do users tend to reproduce, reinforce, or contrast the contents that have angry or hateful content? And finally, migration, which obviously, as you may imagine, the hotspot here when we are talking about hateful and angry comments, given that there is also a significant portion of contents on Salvini's page. And the question we wanted to raise on regarding this topic is, are posts on migration angrier than other posts in other topics? What kind of conversation do they elicit? And is the lexicon of comments similar to that of posts? So do we find an homology, a convergence between the content on posts and the content found in the comments? In terms of the dataset we utilized, it comprised 1,763 total posts published by Matteo Salvini Facebook page between June 2017 and June 2019. So that's a whole 2 years, 24 months of data. And also we gathered comments. There was a total of over 195,000 total comments on posts published, though in this case only for the last year, between November 2019 to June 2019. In terms of the data we use for analysis, we use Stata for statistics, R for sentiment and content analysis, Excel for data analysis, and TLab for semantic network analysis. So when we're talking about angry or hateful posts, this is the kind of content we are thinking about. So it's good to kind of first look at some examples to give the audience a sense of the actual matter of this research. Matteo Salvini Facebook page has become very famous in Italy and beyond for the way in which it constantly stokes fear and outrage at migrants, trying to present them as scroungers that are stealing our resources, that are destroying our culture, that are invading our country. And so, for example, in the post on the right, on the left, you see a video by a left-wing politician, basically being apologetic of migrants and of eventual crimes they may commit. One on the right, we see a disabled woman who is being kicked out of her home, with the implication that while Italians are being kicked out of their homes, instead migrants are given free housing, a free ride. So there is often this contrasting between the sorry condition of Italians, and particularly the Italian poor, and migrants. And as you can see in that post on the right, that often goes with the hashtag Prima Italiani, namely Italians first, obviously an adaptation of Donald Trump, America First. More angry posts examples. Again, so there's news of crimes involving foreign nationals, involving migrants to Italy. For example, a Pakistani man who is accused of having raped two girls, and next a Finnish citizen who is accused of having sexually harassed a woman. So often when there's also more general tendency on the news media and the press, whenever there's a crime, if the person committing the crime is foreign or national or a migrant, the nationality of the person, the background of the person will always be highlighted in order to create fundamentally the implication that migrants are criminal per se. Then we looked at some of the general picture of the engagement in Salvini's post and the evolution of engagement between 2017 and 2019. What was really interesting there for us was the way in which you could see a very strong engagement exactly in the period when Salvini first became Minister of Interior. That was in June 2018, after the formation of Conte I government in alliance with Movimento 5 Stelle, and the vicious campaign that Salvini launched around the summer, which tends to be the time when most migrant arrivals tend to happen through the sea, and a way in which there was a very sustained growth of engagement around the time. But perhaps the more interesting aspect of our research is looking at reactions, because we think that emotional reactions on Facebook now provide an interesting inroad for research, as we can see not only the volume of user engagement, but also its emotional content, the way in which people react to different posts, to different contents, and the kind of emotional associations that go with them. And that is actually something that we looked at in more depth in the course of the research. This table summarizes the findings in terms of the correlation between different emotional reactions and sharing. We ran a regression model to assess the influence over the sharing process, how much posts have been shared, of different reactions. We chose sharing as a proxy for engagement, because when you share a content, it is the most relevant in terms of the consequences for personal engagement. In a sense, that sharing a content implies more than a like, a strong investment by the user in the content, a strong degree of identification and exposure, because you're posting it on your personal wall, and therefore you may also kind of get sanctioned or get criticized for that post. So we thought that exploring this correlation would be quite interesting. And actually, as you can see from the table, we found some very strong correlations between negative reactions and sharing. So with sad is the highest, 4.44, very statistically significant. And the same goes with angry, 3.06, and also very statistically significant. Therefore, it really seems that our argument in terms of the high correlation between user engagement and between negative reactions, sad and angry, and user engagement is proven from this. We will go back to this table later on. Then, though, when we looked at sentiment analysis, the picture looked more complex. We saw that Matteo Salvini's posts and comments on posts often tend to have more positive language than one would assume. So, for example, in the case of Salvini's Facebook post, 47.3% of text has a positive language, while with comments it's a bit lower, but still far higher than negative, 39.6% versus 17.9%. In terms of content analysis, we also thought it would be interesting to look at topics, because different topics may have different emotional contents and different emotional reactions associated with them. We found, quite unsurprisingly, but interestingly, that a significant portion of contents on Salvini's page regard the issue of immigration and crime. 42.0% is immigration and crime, so almost half of the contents. And interestingly, this is also higher than the portion of contents on this issue in users' comments, so which may point to some interesting directions going forward. And then looking more granularly at these, we found something interesting in terms of the composition, in terms of sentiment composition of the different topics. And guess what? Immigration and crime tends to be the topic with the highest level of negative sentiment, 27.8%, higher than politics and institutions, Italian nationalism, Europe and Euroscepticism. Interestingly, also this is the case with comments on posts, where 24% of comments on immigration and crime tend to have a negative connotation. To look more granularly at this aspect, we explore the semantic network of different topics. What that means is the association of words in posts based on topics, which is interesting in order to understand really what kind of words, what kind of lexicon is used, what kind of terms are utilized, and how they contribute to the construction of a discourse, of a narrative. For example, in Italy, you find both positive and negative terms such as criminal and family, children, future, and so on and so forth. And on the issue of migration and security, migration and crime, which is the one that we looked more closely at in this investigation, you also find here different both positive and negative terms. I mean, negative terms such as criminal again, or clandestine, and positive terms or terms that are considered positive in the culture that issues them, such as rules, respect, borders, and so on and so forth. So we thought that perhaps a way going forward would be to explore more granularly the emotional texture of these different terms, the emotional texture of the semantic network associated with different terms or with different topics, as this would give us a kind of more accurate picture of exactly what kind of topics and subtopics tend to have the highest level of negative emotional association, and whether that is conducive to a certain kind, a higher level of user engagement. So this is an issue that perhaps we may want to discuss going forward. I mean, while this is a bit tangential, this is the semantic network for Europe, which is obviously a very important issue and one that is closely related also to migration. In this case, once again, indeed, as you see, it is related to immigration and security as a topic as a whole, and it is associated with terms such as clandestine, and with taxes, with rules, work, and others. And also politics and institutions is correlated with immigration and security. And it is associated with both negative and positive terms, including how housing, Europe, Italy, I mean, it's clearly political institution is a topic that is used a lot to construct identity in the discourse of legal. Finally, I mean, this is admittedly a bit of an exploratory analysis, and also this semantic network analysis is a bit exploratory. But given the work in progress nature of the paper, we thought that it would be good to kind of show you some of the content, some of the results of our analysis in order to get feedback from you. And here in this word cloud, you get a bit of a picture of the terms that are used in Salvini's Facebook page. They range from work to government, state, security, country, law, migrants, common sense, good sense, children, police. I mean, I think it gives you defense, criminals. It gives a sense of the fact that it is a very securitarian and authoritarian discourse that is very much concerned with security. So, summarizing a bit the findings of our research, we found strong evidence for our hypothesis about correlation between emotionally negative content and user engagement. Sentiment analysis on the text of Salvini's Facebook page posts pointed to more contradictory results, perhaps due to the inability to capture irony and sarcasm. Because, for example, Salvini often uses terms such as ciaone, which means hello, but is actually more of a sarcastic salute than an actual salute. And therefore, this is really a methodological question. How do we capture irony and sarcasm in sentiment analysis. Further research will be required to explore this issue. We also started exploring semantic networks, but more dedicated research on this issue is required, perhaps connecting it more to the questions of emotions, which is exactly the point I was anticipating before. Now, quickly to conclude, I wanted to go back to the table with our main results, as this is one that I'd like the audience to have a close look at and see what you think of these results, if they are convincing. As you can see, there is a far higher correlation between sad and angry and shares than there is between likes, comments, love, wow, and shares. So we think that these results, in a way, prove quite clearly that the hypothesis that we are developing is correct. We are, though, have some kind of methodological question on these. I mean, some of us are wondering whether this may be a false positive, as posts that are very popular tend to have both high number of shares and high number of reactions. Though in this case, we still think that given the proportion of sad and angry vis-a-vis likes, comments, that our hypothesis is still supported, is still right. So perhaps in the Q&A sessions, we would like to get some comments from you on these, as we would be very glad to hear your ideas on this point, and more generally on the research, what you think about the research, what you think about its implications, and what it can tell us about literature and about the debate in the field of social media and politics. I hope the presentation was clear enough. I thank very much for the opportunity to participate in this event, and bye-bye.